What if I told you that the most powerful person in Silicon Valley spent his nights mopping floors? That a man dismissed as invisible by entitled executives was actually the architect of $3 billion empires? And what if I told you that when these arrogant tech bros pushed him too far, what happened next would shake the entire industry to its core? This is the story of how one janitor destroyed the ego of Silicon Valley's cruelest CEO without raising his voice once. Before we dive into this incredible journey, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from and if you've ever witnessed someone underestimate the wrong person. Now, I need you to understand something crucial before we begin. This isn't just another underdog story. This is about a man who chose humility over fame, compassion over revenge, and wisdom over wealth. A man who walked away from everything the world told him mattered, only to discover what actually does. And when fate placed him in the crosshairs of the very arrogance and cruelty he'd once escaped, he would teach a lesson so profound that it would redefine what power truly means. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about success, respect, and redemption. So buckle up, because this story goes places you won't see coming. Marcus Chen arrived at Nexicorp headquarters every evening at 6 p.m. sharp, just as the sun began its descent behind the San Francisco skyline, painting the glass towers in shades of amber and gold. He wore the same navy blue uniform every night, carried the same weathered backpack, and nodded the same gentle greeting to the security guard who barely acknowledged his existence. To the world, to the ambitious young executives rushing past him toward their Teslas and BMWs, Marcus was furniture, invisible. A 62-year-old man with silver-streaked hair, calloused hands, and the kind of quiet presence that people's eyes simply slide over without registering. But here's what they didn't know. Here's what made every dismissive glance, every condescending word, every moment they treated him like he was beneath them so tragically ironic it would almost be funny if it weren't so sad. Marcus Chen wasn't just a janitor. 23 years ago, Dr. Marcus Chen had been the founder of DataStream Solutions, a company that revolutionized cloud computing and sold for $2.7 billion. 15 years ago, he'd created Quantum Leap Analytics, which became the backbone of financial forecasting for Fortune 500 companies worldwide. And 12 years ago, he'd built Nexus Innovations from his garage, taking it public in what was then the third largest tech IPO in history. 3 companies, $3 billion exits, a legend in Silicon Valley circles, spoken about in hushed, reverent tones by venture capitalists and entrepreneurs who'd give anything to replicate even a fraction of his success. But here's the thing about Marcus that made him different from every other tech founder who'd made their fortune. When his wife Sarah died suddenly from a brain aneurysm at 48, Marcus realized that he'd spent 20 years building empires, while his actual empire, his family, his marriage, his soul, had been crumbling around him. His daughter barely knew him. His wife had died while he was in a board meeting he couldn't miss. And for what? Money he couldn't spend? Recognition from people who didn't actually know him? A legacy carved in silicon instead of human connection. So Marcus did something that Silicon Valley considered absolutely insane. He walked away, sold his remaining shares, set up trust funds for his daughter and various charities, and disappeared. But he didn't disappear to some tropical island or European villa like people assumed. Marcus had spent his entire adult life in rooms where everyone was trying to be someone, to achieve something, to prove something. He wanted to exist in a space where he could just be. Where the work itself was the point, not the status it brought. Where he could think, observe, and reconnect with the simple dignity of labor that his immigrant parents had taught him before Silicon Valley had swept him up in its intoxicating current. So he became a janitor. Not as a disguise or social experiment, but as an intentional choice to live differently. To be present. To notice things. To exist without the weight of expectation and ego. And for 7 years, across various companies and buildings, it had brought him a peace he'd never known when he was disrupting industries and gracing magazine covers. Until 6 months ago, when he'd taken the night shift at Nexicorp. Nexicorp was everything Marcus had once been seduced by, and ultimately learned to see through. A tech startup that had exploded onto the scene with a viral social media platform that promised to revolutionize human connection, while actually just creating new addictive feedback loops to sell advertising. They'd raised $300 million in venture funding, achieved a $1 billion valuation, and crowned their 29-year-old founder and CEO, Derek Ashton, as the next Steve Jobs. Derek was everything the media loved. Photogenic, charismatic in that rehearsed TED Talk way, fond of black turtlenecks and grandiose pronouncements about changing the world. He was also, Marcus observed quickly, a person almost entirely lacking in empathy, humility, or basic human decency toward anyone he perceived as beneath him. The first time Marcus encountered Derek's cruelty was his second week on the job. He was cleaning the executive floor, emptying trash bins, and wiping down the artisanal coffee station that probably cost more than most people's cars. Derek swept in with two of his executives, Vanessa Park, the chief marketing officer with her designer everything and permanent expression of vague disdain, and Brad Thompson, the chief technology officer who treated everyone like they were too stupid to understand his genius. They were laughing about something, that particular brand of laughter that comes from people who think being mean is the same thing as being funny. Marcus continued his work, becoming even more invisible, a skill he'd perfected over the years. But then Derek noticed the janitor and something shifted in his eyes. That look. Marcus had seen it before. The look of someone who needs to establish dominance, to remind themselves and everyone else of their place in the hierarchy. Derek walked directly up to where Marcus was wiping down a counter and, without breaking eye contact with his executives, set his half-full coffee cup down on the section Marcus had just cleaned. Then, maintaining that same locked gaze with his audience, Derek deliberately tipped the cup over, sending a wave of caramel macchiato across the granite surface and onto the floor. The silence was sharp. Vanessa's eyebrows raised in amused surprise. Brad snorted, and Derek smiled. Not a warm smile. The smile of someone testing boundaries, seeing what they could get away with. "Oops," Derek said, his voice dripping with insincere apology. "Looks like you missed a spot. Better get that cleaned up. Wouldn't want anyone to slip." He turned away before Marcus could respond, and the three of them continued their conversation as if nothing had happened, as if a human being wasn't kneeling on the floor wiping up a mess created purely to humiliate him. Marcus cleaned it up without a word, his face neutral, his movements steady. But something stirred in him that night. Not anger exactly, more like a deep sadness. Sadness that someone with so much opportunity, so much potential to actually do good in the world, was using their power to belittle others. Sadness that the cycle he'd once been part of, where success bred entitlement instead of responsibility, was still churning along, creating new generations of people who confused cruelty with strength. But he said nothing. Did nothing. Just finished his shift and went home to his modest apartment in the Tenderloin, made himself tea and sat in his reading chair, wondering if perhaps it was time to find work elsewhere. Maybe this was the universe telling him this particular lesson wasn't his to teach, except Derek Ashton wasn't done. The coffee incident had apparently given him a new hobby. Over the following weeks, Derek began finding small, calculated ways to make Marcus's existence uncomfortable. Holding meetings in the conference room until well past midnight, ensuring Marcus couldn't clean it until nearly 2 a.m. Leaving passive-aggressive notes about missed spots that didn't actually exist. Making comments within Marcus's earshot about how some people are just meant for simple work, and not everyone can handle the pressure of real innovation. And Derek wasn't alone. Vanessa joined in with her own brand of casual cruelty, once literally stepping over Marcus as he cleaned a spill, her Louboutin heels clicking past his head as she laughed into her phone about the help these days. Brad contributed by treating Marcus like a particularly stupid piece of furniture, once snapping his fingers and pointing at a trash can that needed emptying, not even bothering with words, just gestures, like Marcus was a dog who needed directing. The other executives followed their leader's example. This was company culture after all, set from the top. And the culture at Nexacorp under Derek Ashton was one where your worth was determined entirely by your position, your salary, your title, where treating service workers with basic human dignity was apparently optional, or worse, a sign of weakness. Marcus watched it all with those quiet, observing eyes that saw everything. He noticed that Derek's cruelty wasn't random. It intensified when he was stressed, when funding rounds weren't going well, when board meetings went poorly. The cruelty was a pressure valve, a way for Derek to feel powerful when other aspects of his life felt uncertain. Vanessa's disdain masked a deep insecurity. Marcus had overheard enough of her phone conversations to know she came from poverty, and her designer armor and cutting remarks were defense mechanisms to ensure no one could send her back there. Brad's arrogance covered a desperation to prove himself to a father who'd never thought he was good enough, driving him to put everyone else down to elevate himself. Marcus saw all of this because Marcus had been all of this once upon a time. Different flavors of the same poison. He recognized the patterns because he'd lived them, and ultimately they'd cost him everything that actually mattered. The breaking point came on a Thursday night in November. Marcus was cleaning the main presentation hall, a massive space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, where Nexacorp held their weekly all-hands meetings. He was running his microfiber cloth over the chairs when he heard voices. Loud voices. Derek's voice specifically raised in that particular pitch that meant someone was about to get destroyed. Marcus should have left. Should have come back later. But something made him pause. And in that pause, he heard Derek say something that changed everything. Listen everyone, I want you to see this. This is exactly what I'm talking about when I say not everyone gets to sit at the table. Come here, you. Yes, you. The janitor. Come here. Marcus turned. Derek was standing in the center of the hall with about 15 executives and employees, apparently in some kind of impromptu late-night meeting. All eyes swiveled to Marcus. The air changed. Became charged with that specific kind of anticipatory cruelty that happens when a group senses blood in the water. Marcus approached slowly, his cleaning cart behind him, his expression neutral. Yes, sir, he said quietly. His voice was calm, measured, the voice of someone who'd given 1,000 boardroom presentations, though no one in this room knew that. Derek smiled that smile again. The predator smile. I was just giving a talk about excellence, about what separates the winners from the... He gestured vaguely at Marcus. Everyone else. And you're a perfect example. Tell me, what's your name? Marcus. Marcus. Right. Marcus, how long have you been a janitor? A pause. Marcus could see where this was going, could see the trap being laid. 7 years in this role. But I've worked in many capacities over my lifetime. Derek's smile widened. He turned to his audience. 7 years. See? This is what I mean. Some people find their level and they stay there. No ambition, no drive to be more, to achieve more. They're content being... He waved his hand dismissively. This? While we... Derek continued, warming to his theme, spreading his arms to encompass the room. We are the people who refuse to accept limitations, who disrupt, who innovate, who change the world. And that's the fundamental difference between people like us and people like Marcus here. We see a mountain, we climb it. They see a mountain, they clean the base camp. Laughter rippled through the room. Not everyone laughed. Some people looked uncomfortable, shifting their weight, eyes downcast. But enough laughed. And that was all Derek needed. His cruelty had an audience, and an audience meant validation. Vanessa chimed in, her voice honey-sweet with venom. I mean, at least he's consistent. Same uniform every day. Same routine. Must be. Nice not having to think too hard. More laughter. Brad added, probably never even used a computer. What's it like living in the past, buddy? The laughter grew louder. And then Derek went further. He walked up to Marcus, close enough that Marcus could smell his expensive cologne. Close enough that the power dynamic was unmistakable. Actually, you know what? I think there's a teaching moment here. Marcus, I want you to tell everyone what your dreams were when you were young. What did little Marcus want to be when he grew up? An astronaut? A doctor? A CEO? He said the last word with particular mockery, and the room erupted in laughter again. The silence that followed Derek's question was heavy, profound. The kind of silence where everything hangs in the balance. Marcus looked at Derek, really looked at him, and in that moment, something shifted in Marcus's eyes. A decision being made, a line being crossed, not toward revenge but toward teaching, toward disrupting the very system that had created Derek Ashton and people like him. When Marcus spoke, his voice was still quiet, but there was a weight to it now, a gravity that hadn't been there before. You know, Derek, that's an interesting question. What did I dream of being? He paused, and in that pause, the room seemed to hold its breath without knowing why. I dreamed of being someone who built things that mattered, someone who created opportunities for others, someone who understood that power was responsibility, not a weapon. And for a while I thought I'd achieved those dreams. Derek's smile faltered slightly. There was something in Marcus's tone that didn't match the script. This wasn't how the janitor was supposed to respond. He was supposed to stammer, to be embarrassed, to confirm Derek's narrative. Right, well, we all have dreams, Derek said, trying to regain control of the moment. But reality has a way of sorting people out, doesn't it? Some people are builders, and some people are... He gestured at the cleaning cart. Marcus nodded slowly. Yes, reality does sort people out. But not in the way you think. See? The real test isn't whether you can build a company or raise venture funding or get your face on magazine covers. The real test is who you are when you have power. How you treat people when there's no benefit to treating them well. Whether you see service as beneath you or as fundamentally human. The discomfort in the room was palpable now. People were shifting, uncertain. This wasn't following the expected pattern. The janitor was supposed to shrink. Instead, he was expanding, filling the space with a presence that seemed to grow with each word. Vanessa stepped in, her voice sharp. That's a nice philosophy for someone who's given up. But we're actually out here changing the world, creating value, driving innovation. What are you driving? A mop bucket. Marcus turned his calm gaze to her. I've driven a lot of things, Vanessa. More than you might imagine. But let me ask you something. Do you know why you're really cruel? Why you need to put people down to feel elevated? Vanessa's face flushed. Excuse me. You don't get to psychoanalyze me. You don't know anything about me. I know you grew up in Bakersfield. I know your father worked at a meatpacking plant and your mother cleaned houses. I know you got a scholarship to Berkeley and clawed your way into this world, terrified every single day that someone would see through you and send you back. I know, because I've heard you on your phone at 3 a.m. when you think no one's listening. And I know because I see it. The armor. The designer labels. The cruelty that says, I belong here and you don't. Because you're still trying to convince yourself you belong here. The room went dead silent. Vanessa looked like she'd been slapped. How dare you? I'm not judging you, Marcus said gently. I'm telling you I see you. And seeing someone isn't an attack. It's recognition. But what you do with your fear, how you treat others to manage your own insecurity, that's a choice. And right now, you're choosing cruelty. Brad jumped in, angry now. Who the hell do you think you are? You're a janitor. You clean toilets. You don't get to lecture us about choices or success or anything else. We're building something real here. Marcus turned to him. Brad, tell me about your father, about how you went to Stanford, got your PhD in computer science, and he still told you that you'd never be as good as your brother, the surgeon. How that drives everything you do. How every accomplishment is still trying to hear him say he's proud of you. And how he never does. Brad's face went white, then red. You have no right. Your daughter called you last week, Marcus continued, his voice still gentle, never accusatory. I heard you on the phone. She wanted you to come to her violin recital. You told her you were too busy changing the world. That's what you said. Daddy's changing the world. Honey. And you know what's tragic about that? Your father said the same thing to you. That he was too busy saving lives to watch you play soccer. The cycle continues. The wounds pass down. The room was in shock. Complete, total shock. How did the janitor know these things? How was he speaking with this authority, this insight, this absolute command of the room? Derek's face had gone from amused to confused to something approaching alarm. Okay, I don't know what kind of weird stalker thing you've got going, Derek said, trying to reassert control, his voice rising. But you're way out of line. You're done. You're fired. Security. Marcus didn't move. Didn't flinch. Just kept that steady gaze on Derek. You're not going to fire me, Derek. Not yet. Because you need to understand something first. You asked what I dreamed of being. Let me answer that question fully. And then Marcus did something that changed everything. He reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out his boss phone. Not an iPhone or Samsung like everyone in the room carried. An old flip phone, the kind people assumed only grandparents or people too poor for smartphones still used. He opened it, scrolled through something, and then he did something no one expected. He smiled. A real smile, warm and slightly sad. What I dreamed of being, Marcos said, was irrelevant. What I became was the founder and CEO of 3 companies you might have heard of. Data Stream Solutions, Quantum Leap Analytics, Nexus. Innovations. I sold DataStream for $2.7 billion, took Quantum Leap public at a $4 billion valuation, built Nexus from absolutely nothing and watched it hit unicorn status in under 3 years. Forbes called me the Midas of Silicon Valley. TechCrunch ran a cover story called The Man Who Can't Stop Building Empires. The silence in the room was absolutely deafening. People were frozen, literally frozen, mouths open, eyes wide. Derek looked like someone had just told him the floor wasn't solid. That's impossible, Vanessa whispered. Marcus Chen is... You're not. He's retired. He disappeared. No one knows where. I know where, Marcus said quietly. I'm right here. Have been for 6 months. Mopping your floors, cleaning your toilets, emptying your trash, and watching. Always watching. Seeing exactly who you are when you think no one important is looking. Brad's voice was barely audible. Why? Why would someone like you do this? Marcus's expression softened. Because someone like me realized that being someone like me meant I'd forgotten how to be human. My wife died while I was in a board meeting for a company I didn't even need. My daughter barely spoke to me for 5 years because I missed every moment that mattered. I built empires and lost my soul. So I walked away. Chose a life where the work is the point, where I can exist without ego, where I can remember what it feels like to be in service rather than in charge. He paused, looking around the room at the shocked faces. And you know what I learned? I learned that respect isn't about title or position. It's about character. It's about how you treat the person who can do nothing for you. And every single one of you in this room, led by Derek, has failed that test spectacularly. Derek was scrambling now, his brain trying to catch up, trying to regain footing. If you're really Marcus Chen, prove it. Anyone can claim anything. Show us proof. Marcus nodded. Fair. Enough. He pulled out his phone again, hit a speed dial and put it on speaker. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Marcus, I was hoping you'd call. Are you ready to come back? The board is asking again. The voice was clear, distinctive, and everyone in the room recognized it because it belonged to Richard Dalton, one of the most powerful venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. The man who'd funded at least half the companies represented in this room, including Nexacorp. Hi, Richard. I'm actually calling for a different reason. I'm here at Nexacorp with Derek Ashton and his executive team. Can you verify who I am for them? A pause on the other end. Then a laugh. You're at Nexacorp? What are you doing there? Wait, don't tell me you're consulting for them. Derek, if you've got Marcus Chen helping you and you didn't tell me, I'm going to be very upset that I heard about it this way. Marcus is the best mind in the valley. Probably the best I've ever known. If he's with you, you just won the lottery. Derek's face went through several colors. Mr. Dalton, he's not consulting. He couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't say the word janitor because suddenly it sounded absolutely insane. He was teaching us a lesson, Marcus said into the phone. I'll fill you in later, Richard. Thanks for the verification. Anytime. And Marcus? Whatever they did to make you reveal yourself, they screwed up big time. Call me this weekend. The line went dead. The room remained frozen. Then Brad spoke, his voice shaking slightly. You said you've been watching us. What else did you see? Marcus looked at him directly. I saw you copy code from an open source project and present it as your own innovation to Derek and the board. I saw Vanessa manipulate user data metrics to inflate engagement numbers for the investor deck. I saw Derek, he turned to the CEO. I saw you accept bribes from a competitor to slow down feature development that would hurt their market position. And I documented all of it. The color drained from Derek's face. You're lying. You can't possibly. I have emails, screenshots, recordings from devices you thought were off in conference rooms. 7 years as a janitor teaches you that people forget you exist, and they say and do things they would never do if they remembered someone was present. I have everything. The question is, what am I going to do with it? Vanessa's voice was panicked now. You're going to destroy us. That's why you did this. Some kind of revenge against Silicon Valley. No, Marcus said firmly. If I wanted revenge, I'd just send everything to Richard and your other investors and watch this company implode by Monday. But that's not who I am. That's not what this is about. He moved to the center of the room, and now everyone was listening with an attention that went beyond fear. This was the attention of people suddenly realizing they were in the presence of someone operating on a completely different level. This is about showing you what you're becoming. About holding up a mirror before it's too late. Derek, you're 29 years old. You built something impressive. You have talent and vision. But you've confused authority with entitlement, and you're using your power to diminish others rather than elevate them. You're becoming the very thing that's poisoning this industry. He turned to Vanessa. You've worked incredibly hard to get here. You deserve to be in this room. But you don't prove you belong by tearing others down. The armor doesn't protect you. It just isolates you from the very connections you're craving. Then to Brad. You are brilliant. Truly brilliant. But your father's approval isn't coming. And you need to stop sacrificing your relationships with people who actually love you while you chase the approval of someone who withheld it as a power play. Marcus's voice shifted, became softer but somehow more powerful. Here's what I learned. The hard way. Success without character is just noise. Money without compassion is just numbers on a screen. Power without humility is just the prelude to a very hard fall. I learned these lessons by losing everything that mattered. You still have time to learn them differently. Derek's voice was quiet now, stripped of its earlier bravado. What do you want from us? I want you to understand something crucial, Marcus said. Every person you encounter, regardless of their position or title, is carrying a universe of experience, wisdom, pain, and value. The janitor might be a former CEO. The security guard might be a retired colonel with a PhD. The barista might be an artist who sees the world in ways you can't imagine. Or they might just be people trying to do honest work with dignity. Either way, they deserve your respect. Not because of what they can do for you, but because they're human. That's enough. He paused, letting the words sink in. I'm not going to expose what I documented. I'm not going to destroy this company. But I am going to give you a choice. You can continue down this path, where cruelty is culture and people are disposable based on their utility to you. If you do, you'll probably be successful for a while. Maybe even a long while. But you'll wake up one day, if you're lucky, and realize you built something hollow. That you became someone you don't recognize in the mirror. Or, Marcus continued, you can choose differently. You can build a culture where how you treat people matters as much as what you achieve. Where success is measured not just in valuation but in how many people you helped along the way. Where power is responsibility, not a weapon. I can't make that choice for you. But I can tell you that the first path ends in regret. I know. I walked it. The room was absolutely silent. Several people were wiping their eyes. The shift in energy was profound, from confrontation to something else entirely. Contemplation. Reckoning. The uncomfortable but necessary process of seeing yourself clearly for the first time. Derek's voice cracked slightly when he spoke. Why didn't you just tell us who you were from the beginning? Why go through all this?